Engadio und Tom Shepard führten Regie bei dem Dokumentarfilm Knocking über Jehovas Zeugen. Joel P. Engadio ist ein homosexueller amerikanischer Politiker, Schriftsteller und Vertreter der öffentlichen Sicherheit in San Francisco. Er ist Supervisor für District 4 in San Francisco, Kalifornien und seit 2023 im Amt. Er wurde als Zeuge Jehovas erzogen, identifiziert sich jedoch nicht mit der Religion. Engadio ist schwul. Seit 2015 ist er mit seinem Mann verheiratet. Die Dokumentation bekam zahlreiche Preise, unter anderem als beste Dokumentation 2006 beim USA Filmfestival. Dieses Video zeigt Ausschnitte aus dem Dokumentarfilm Knocking. Für mehr Informationen besuchen Sie bitte die Links in der Videobeschreibung.
My name is Joel Engardio, and I come from an Italian Catholic family where my mother converted and became a Jehovah's Witness, the only one in my family to do so. So I was raised in the religion, chose not to join, and decided to become a journalist instead.
Jehovah's Witnesses were founded in 1879 and have always been outsiders. Leader C.T. Russell challenged mainstream Christian beliefs like hellfire and got rid of the collection plate. He urged people to read the Bible for themselves, to have a first-name relationship with Jehovah God.
I think a lot of people who were schooled in Christianity, who went to Sunday school, they get perceptions of Jehovah's Witnesses that were taught to them, perhaps stereotypes or erroneous assumptions that Jehovah's Witnesses are not Christian, or be wary of them, or they think only special people get to go to heaven, and so there's a lot of, or perhaps they're a cult.
Just continue reading the Bible.
Well, we do that too.
Very good.
So. I'm not sure if we're reading the same Bible, though.
Well, I think so.
We do come before you humbly this evening to thank you so much for this time that we have to be able to spend together.
You really have to look at the classic definition of what is a cult, and do Jehovah's Witnesses match it? I mean, are witnesses holed up in some compound in Idaho? Have they only been around since the 1960s? Are they, do they follow one magnanimous leader? Do they give all their money away? And the answer to that is no. They've been around for 130 years. Since the 1970s, Jehovah's Witnesses are run by a committee. So a committee of 9 to 12 men who constantly rotate and change. So there is no one leader. And Jehovah's Witnesses, unlike most religions, pass no collection plate. There's no tithing, there's literally no collection plate at any service. All the donations are voluntary and anonymous. So, and the witnesses interact with society. The children go to public school. Witnesses work in society. So you can't call them a cult because they don't fit the definition. But they are misunderstood in a smaller religion, and so it's easy to label somebody as lesser than. So most people don't realize what impact Jehovah's Witnesses have had on civil liberties in the United States.
On the eve of World War II, 2 young Jehovah's Witnesses refused to salute the flag in their Pennsylvania classroom. Across America, thousands of witness kids took the same stand and were kicked out of school. The witnesses sued the government. 8-1, the Supreme Court ruled against the witnesses. It said the government could force its citizens to make a patriotic salute. Jehovah's Witnesses continued their refusal. Editorials in 200 newspapers condemned the ruling, noting the irony. Isn't this what America was supposed to be fighting against in Nazi Germany? They argued that a free country shouldn't force people to pledge allegiance to anything. In an unprecedented move, the Supreme Court agreed and reversed itself in just 3 years.
Jehovah's Witnesses have been at the U.S. Supreme Court more than any other group other than the U.S. government. And the cases have reverberated throughout the entire First Amendment: freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, assembly.
Jehovah's Witnesses were talking about a different solution, and sometimes aggressively so, because they felt very strongly that the ultimate solution doesn't come from war, but rather from God's kingdom.
Combine that with the nationalism that was sweeping the country in the face of growing international difficulty. And there was quite the unwillingness, the intolerance to hear the message that the witnesses wanted to articulate.
Witnesses were scorned as unpatriotic. They wouldn't pledge loyalty to any man-made symbols, calling into question what it means to be an American.
Between 1935 and 1958, the Jehovah's Witnesses were in the Supreme Court a remarkable 45 times. And there are periods during First Amendment history when you see a particular group really carrying the banner of free expression. You could say that they don't fight, you could say that they don't vote, but what they have done is litigate. And in a way, they've contributed more to American democracy and the protection of American ideals than a lot of people have with their votes.
The right to speak freely on street corners and door to door, to publish an unconventional message without getting arrested, the right to be a conscientious objector of war, and the right of all patients seeking medical treatment to control what's done to their bodies.
You can connect the dots and show how Jehovah's Witnesses have actually helped groups, even groups they disagree with. And what's really interesting is that Jehovah's Witnesses are not progressive. They're moral social conservatives. They aren't activists. They're only going to the court for their own purposes, so they can preach and worship the way they want. Yet, when they win a right, that right extends to everybody across the board. Jehovah's Witnesses don't vote because they see voting as putting your faith or your stock in man. They believe that Jesus commanded Christians to stay out of politics. So when Jehovah's Witnesses look at other religions that are politicizing their beliefs, they see them as quote-unquote false Christians. So for Jehovah's Witnesses, any kind of allegiance or working with politics would be wrong, so they stay away from that.
In pursuit of their total worship of God, Jehovah's Witnesses gave up all civic involvement. They refused to pledge allegiance, vote, or support the military. No man-made government, they said, could bring world peace.
Jehovah's Witnesses were among the first groups to speak out against Hitler and the Nazi Party. And so when that happened, Hitler put the Jehovah's Witnesses in the concentration camps because he wanted to shut down that message that they were spreading. And so once under Hitler's persecution, then Jehovah's Witnesses started to see what was happening to the Jews.
They printed the accounts in Watchtower publications in many countries and broadcast them in America.
The devil has put his representative Hitler in control, a man who is cruel, malicious, and ruthless. He cruelly persecutes the Jews because they were once Jehovah's Covenant people.
The witnesses in the mid-1930s were trying to tell people what was happening, and they talked about what was happening to themselves as well as the Jews, but it was largely ignored because it was done through the Watchtower magazine when people went door to door, and most people wouldn't believe or wouldn't listen to a Jehovah's Witness with credibility.
During World War II, Jehovah's Witnesses refused to fight. They wouldn't follow Hitler in Germany and wouldn't support the war effort in America. The witnesses criticized Christian religions that endorsed any nation, strictly following the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill."
No man-made government is ever going to be able to solve the world's problems. And they'll say, look at 6,000 years of recorded history. It hasn't worked yet. And how many different political systems have we attempted? And it just keeps getting worse. So they say, only God, only God's kingdom is what you should vote for. Only that is what will solve the world's problems. So they don't vote because they don't want to put that allegiance or faith into a man. One of the greatest misconceptions about Jehovah's Witnesses is that when they knock on your door, they need you to convert for themselves to get into paradise. Jehovah's Witnesses get no brownie points for the X number of people that they convert. They don't get brownie points for knocking on X number of doors or spending X number of hours in the ministry. It's done because they believe that Jesus commanded Christians to spread the good news of God's kingdom. And the good news being that all the world's problems are going to be solved soon when God's kingdom arrives. And so that's it. For the Jehovah's Witness, they feel fulfilled in sharing that message. So my mom, who's been a Jehovah's Witness for nearly 30 years, she's never converted anyone by knocking on doors. But yet she still goes door to door and feels fulfilled that she's sharing this important message. So witnesses aren't obligated to spend any amount of time in the ministry. A full-time minister would spend 70 hours a month going door to door, but only 10% of Jehovah's Witnesses are full-time ministers. 90% of Jehovah's Witnesses go door to door when they can. And so on average, that might be 8 hours a month. And so at the end of the month, Jehovah's Witnesses fill out a timesheet that just notes how many hours they spent and how many people accepted perhaps literature, and they submit that, and then that's tabulated annually. But there's no requirement that you have to spend a certain number of hours per month. Jehovah's Witnesses refuse blood transfusions mainly based on a scripture in the book of Acts that says abstain from blood, literally. And so they take that to mean even transfusions into the body. But beyond that, Jehovah's Witnesses also see blood as sacred. It's what life is from. Jesus shed his blood for mankind's sin, for mankind's salvation. So they see that as just something not to tinker with, that it was a commandment from God, and so they're going to honor that.
Following the witness way of life isn't easy. At 23, Seth's own faith is being tested.
My health condition that I'm facing right now, it's called sclerosing cholangitis. Definitely went from something I thought was minor to now something very serious.
Do you have any more Prograf, Mom?
A rare genetic disease has been attacking Seth's liver since he was a teenager. Jehovah's Witnesses accept most medical treatment. Seth takes 30 pills a day and gets nightly injections to keep his liver functioning. However, he'll need a liver transplant. Seth wants the transplant. But as a Jehovah's Witness, he won't take a blood transfusion, even his own stored in advance. And without blood, hospitals won't take him.
When Jehovah's Witnesses refuse blood transfusions, it caused extreme tension between the medical establishment and the religion. And when blood transfusions became common in the 1950s, doctors would force the blood on witnesses against their will. And witnesses said, look, we're not against medicine. Treat us, just find a different way other than blood. Well, for 30 or so years, there was no other way. And so it was always this conflict.
It's fearful for us when somebody's sick. All Jehovah's Witnesses carry that little card with us in our wallet.
If I drive home tonight after playing hockey and get into a car accident, this is something that'll hopefully protect me if I'm unconscious and not able to make the stand that I've already prepared myself to make.
They believe that God has the right to set the standards of what's right and wrong, and that those standards, when adhered to, are always going to be bringing blessings to those who are obedient to them. So they don't feel like they're being pressured into not taking a blood transfusion. This is not mere compliance to some organizational dictum. It's their personally deeply held religious beliefs that that's what God expects of those who serve him.
When HIV and AIDS came along in the 1980s, suddenly the medical establishment had a reason to take another look at blood. And here were these witnesses all along saying, hey, we don't want blood, try something new. So in a bizarre kind of confluence, they decided to work together after being antagonists for so long.
USC will perform Seth's surgery to meet the religious needs of Jehovah's Witnesses. In turn, the hospital gets to test out new technology on them. The aim is to limit blood loss to the point where most transfusions are unnecessary. USC thinks bloodless surgery should be the new standard for everyone.
That led to this weird alliance between very strange bedfellows. Jehovah's Witnesses, who never liked blood, didn't want to use blood, and a scientific community trying to figure out how are we going to do surgery if we can't use the blood supply because it might be infected.
You certainly start thinking about, was this the right thing to do? And obviously as parents, with Seth being 23 years old, we didn't make this decision by ourselves.
He could die. And then when I found out that my dad wanted to do the live donor, it was even kind of worse. You want to have your brother alive, but you also risk losing your dad. This is a scary time, but hopefully, more than likely, it's all going to turn out okay. And even if we do lose one of them or both of them, you remember that there is a hope for the resurrection. If he does not wake up, we'll still be able to see him. in paradise, the way we were meant to live.
Everything was accomplished, and really surprised. I woke up, and I was like, oh, I feel a lot better, and it's like really big change.
We're very happy with the results.
So it's really interesting to me to see how a religious belief, when accommodated, can actually benefit the rest of society, because now in many hospitals, you and I will receive bloodless surgery and not even know it. Of course, if we needed blood, we would get it, but doctors seem to be pushing to this new frontier.